Welcome to Hail Varsity Radio, the voice of Husker Nation. Insight, opinion, expertise, with the biggest and best names talking Nebraska across the state. Join the show on Twitter at Hail Varsity and at Schmitz_radio. Call in at 402-466-ESPN or 1-800-825-5865. Here's Chris Schmitz.
Welcome to it Wednesdays here at Hail Varsity Radio, presented by the Nebraska Lottery. Chris Schmidt, Elijah Herbal. Good to have you in, Cowboy. We are loaded up. People are hot on Twitter. The Ohio State exception is getting louder and louder due to COVID and what happens. Man, people are after Stuart Mandel. Man, people are after Ralph Russo. And you know what? Nebraska looks pretty darn smart from a statement they issued a while back. And we'll get into it. Numbers to dial in, 466-3776, 466-3776, 800-825-5865. Find us on Twitter at Herbal Essence for Elijah, at Schmidt_radio for me, and can email Chris at HailVarsity.com. Mike Babcock from Hail Varsity going to join us here in about 20 minutes. Mike Schuey will check in. We'll get his take on some golf, and of course, he'll have a take or several on football. Brad Edwards to join us, college football insider with ESPN. We'll get his take on the college football playoff and what's the smart path for the Big Ten if things get a little crazy and crusty with Ohio State in that 6-game minimum to play in the conference title game. And we'll get thoughts on Purdue and the Big Ten from our friend Tom Dienheart from blackandgold.com. Got the numbers to get in. Let's lay out what is going on. So, you now have a couple of games canceled this weekend in the Big Ten. Michigan officially out. All right, you have Minnesota and Northwestern on the sidelines. Michigan, too, is going to sit this thing out. So what does that mean? Well, there is fear that Michigan may not be able to go. There is fear that Minnesota may not be able to go. Not this weekend. Ohio State is supposed to play Michigan State. But the reality is this from some of the national pundits. If Ohio State does not get enough games, and right now the threshold to play in the conference championship game is you got to have a minimum of 6 games. Ohio State has already missed Maryland this year due to COVID. They have missed Illinois due to COVID. So if the Michigan game does not happen, then that is strike 3, you're out, much like Wisconsin, okay? So what is going to happen here for Ohio State here if things continue to go the way they've been going? Stuart Mandel from The Athletic, editor-in-chief, made this suggestion and this thought, and Gary Barta is from Iowa. He's on the College Football Playoff Committee. There is some issue. If there's not enough games for Ohio State, the committee could flip Ohio State out of the number 4 spot. And here comes another SEC team named Texas A&M. So Stewart says this: if Michigan can't play Ohio State, the Big Ten should take the Pac-12 approach and just find them another game. Someone else will inevitably get canceled. Does that not sound familiar? If you lose a game to COVID, do you try and replace a lost game? That was Nebraska's idea. Nebraska is still pulling arrows out of the side of their body from the national beating they took. And there's some inference of, well, Nebraska wanted special circumstances. No. Nebraska just wanted to play a game to get better. We have all seen this season, and we have heard Scott Frost, this team needs to get better. They get better by playing. Because while they've practiced a lot, they have not hit a lot, okay, due to the COVID circumstances. And you're seeing the lack of development, quite honestly, kind of flare and raise its ugly head. Would Nebraska be a better football team when it comes to shooting itself in the foot had they had more practices, had they had more games? We'd like to think so. We don't know. But this is wild. And, Nebraska getting some credit as well, as Brian Christopherson posting the comment from Nebraska back in October. And folks got all over Nebraska in October with their statement here. We believe in the flexibility to play non-conference games could have been beneficial, not only for Nebraska, but for other Big Ten teams who may be in a similar position as the season progresses. The ability for all Big Ten Big Ten members to play a non-conference game if needed could provide another data point possible for the college football playoff. BYU has like 30 games under their belt, and they're still, because of strength of schedule. I know Michigan's down this year. At least Ohio State has gotten the Indiana win, right? But, where are you at as a Nebraska fan? Is the rematch something that's possible? Would Nebraska and Ohio State tee it up again if that's what's possible? Maybe. Would things be moved around so you make up the game with Maryland now that they're back to playing football, Ohio State and Maryland? Well, Maryland has a date with Rutgers. Do you just tell Rutgers to go sit in the corner? Sorry you lost your last game of the regular season because Ohio State needs a game? Or do you move forward with a rematch? Mitch Sherman has a piece coming out, his sit down with Bill Moose. A lot of things covered with the Moose. And Bill Moose seems to think, per an excerpt on Mitch's Twitter, that Minnesota should be okay. Minnesota in 2 weeks should be okay. Let's hope that happens. I want to see Nebraska one more time against P.J. Fleck. I know what's on Nebraska's plate right now is Purdue, but it's pretty wild. Barry Alvarez speaking earlier today as he's part of the competition committee. He's the guy, one of the guys that made the rules about, the 6-game minimum. Well, he's now readjusting, saying the Big Ten needs to rethink that criteria. Right now, you still have a sizable lead if you're Northwestern because you've won the head-to-head game against Wisconsin. Stranger things have happened, though. If you dial back that 6-game minimum and Northwestern doesn't get out of its tailspin, I think they will. But if they don't, that might open things up for Wisconsin to get in and be your Big Ten West representative. Listen, I know that Nebraska has been ahead of the curve on this. I know Nebraska's thought broader and more realistic than many of their peers and chancellors and presidents in the Big Ten. Nebraska's been right on this all along, and they've been treated like a redheaded stepchild. Nebraska wears red. So I think, in my opinion, you want the payday. You've moved forward with this season, and while it looks like it's special treatment to Ohio State, you got to ask yourself, do you want a Big Ten representative in the college football playoff, yes or no? And if there needs to be some earth movement for Ohio State to get a little help from the conference, are you good with that as long as they get to a college football playoff and that payday's spread throughout? That's really the question. Do you want a team that has a chance to compete for a national championship to get that green light, even if things you were calling for earlier and got shut down on now get reconfigured for somebody else? It's really the question in front of us on that. And it's a greater good for the league. It'd be doing Ohio State a solid. And they're a good team. They're unbeaten if they stay unbeaten. But if they lose games out to COVID, I'd be all for rematching them if you're Nebraska, or figuring out a way to get Ohio State another ball game to get them a chance to play in the playoff, assuming they keep running the table and they win the Big Ten.
The way I see it, Ohio State was with Nebraska before the season whenever it was coming down to, are we even going to play football this year? Nebraska needed a teammate like Ohio State in that battle.
Needed that voice.
To even get this season back. If this was Nebraska in a place where they'd only played a couple games and maybe they need to get in the college football playoff, I know that seems so far away and
Doesn't
so
it?
far-fetched right now to think that maybe that could be us. But if I put myself in those shoes, I know Nebraska fans will be kicking and screaming to get the rules changed to get Nebraska in the college football playoff, because Ohio State's one of the better teams we've seen in the Big Ten, just based on their performances this year since Nebraska's joined the Big Ten.
Well, and you got a former Buckeye that kind of went off last night during the college football playoff reveal, and Kirk Herbstreit apologized later last night, went on radio, I think in Detroit this morning. But this was pretty fascinating with, you can't beat them on the field if you're Michigan. So what do? You're going to pull the COVID card. I say that quasi tongue-in-cheek, but hey, that would absolutely, if you can't beat them on the field, you can sure as hell keep them out of the playoff another way if you're Michigan. But here's part of Kirk Herbstreit last night, doubling down on some accusations. And Herbstreit knows all the major power players in college football. He does. They text him. He texts them. His kids play at Clemson. So you've had accusations all year long by some coaches towards other teams. They just don't want to get beat down. So they're using one case of COVID or X number of cases of COVID to get out of the game and save face. Here's Kirk Herbstreit.
I don't know all the numbers as far as their COVID is concerned. I'm just saying we live in such a strange world that I've talked to a lot of coaches around the country that have said they really feel teams are opting out to avoid playing games because they don't want to get humiliated. They don't want to they don't want to lose with the team that they have. They don't necessarily have too many COVID positives. They just don't want to have to take the field with the team they have and go get embarrassed. So they're basically waving the white flag and saying we can't play. So there's a lot of that's being talked about around the country. I'm not suggesting, I have no idea what Michigan's situation is. I'm saying they have the power to potentially say, hey, we can't play next week, and there's nothing Ohio State could do about it if they decide to say that.
That is true. I'll say this. Any team that does that they're not teaching any kind of lesson. They don't stand for anything. They have no courage, they have no character. Anybody that would do that purposely just to sabotage another team.
There's real competition. There's real angst. There are coaches that really don't like one another. There are programs that hate one another. But at the heart, I think from a competitive standpoint, you can't go there at Michigan. You can't go there at Jim Harbaugh. Harbaugh wears cleats around his living room. Harbaugh wears cleats on his wood floor in the kitchen. The guy wishes he could still play. He wants to go out there and earn it. And we'll get to the Herbstreit apology in a second. But, man, Florida State is who I think is getting circled right now because they have ticked off a couple teams in consecutive weeks. They ticked off Clemson. And who got pissed at Florida State last weekend? Like a last-second cancellation. We have no interest in going down to Florida State again. It was. Let me pull up where Florida State was supposed to host last weekend. But there seems to be a lot of smoke towards the old Seminoles with some of the accusations. But you had an Ohio State guy throwing some shade at Michigan, and with Florida State, I mean, man, that's you'd hate for that to be the case. Virginia, Coach Mendenhall, he kind of echoed a little bit of what Dabo was saying. Now, Herbie found time to apologize, which is cool. But it'd be nice if some of these folks that have lit torches, grabbed tire irons, and grabbed the arrows from their quill would follow Herbie's suit and say, you know what, Nebraska? I'm a national writer from Missouri. You know what, Nebraska? I'm a Heisman winner from Michigan. You know what, Nebraska? I'm a brilliant writer from Northwestern. You guys had it right all the way. You weren't looking for special treatment. You fought to play. Clearly, your team's 1-4. And the smart thing in hindsight, if you're just about record and saving embarrassment, second half moments against Ohio State, the entire Illinois game, I mean, you'd like to erase that. Absolutely. It'd have been easier not to play and get pinatted. But that's not how Nebraska works. That's not how Scott Frost operates. They went and played. They want to get better. Someday they want to be in position to knock on a West Division door, right? Get a chance Saturday to try and move the record up. Here's Kirk Herbstreit, his apology. Last check, it was nearing 1 million hits on social media, but he kind of recalibrated and said, man, I was in the wrong here.
Hey, guys. Just wanted to speak for a second about some comments that I made earlier tonight on our college football ranking show. Made some comments about Michigan, about the potential of them waving a white flag and intentionally trying to avoid playing Ohio State by just saying, hey, we have too many cases and we're going to opt out. I had no business at all saying that. I have no evidence of that. It was completely unfair to the University of Michigan, to Jim Harbaugh, to his players and coaches, and I just want to apologize.
He says, I'm sorry. I'm forgetting about it. Sorry. So, and Nebraska fans are in full lit torch mode, going after Stuart Mandel, going after those who have come after Nebraska. So, and Dr. Rob Zadiska getting after Ralph Russo. I don't think Russo's wrong with the benefit of Ohio State getting them into a college football playoff, but doesn't see the difference. His take was Nebraska playing Podunk U was about Nebraska's benefit. We'll talk to Mike Babcock next from Hail Varsity, presented by the Nebraska Lottery.
And we're back
Fellas, think we could listen to the radio
on Hail Varsity Radio, presented by the Nebraska Lottery.
Yes! That's awesome!
Back with you, it's Hail Varsity, presented by the Nebraska Lottery. Chris Schmidt, Elijah Herba. We welcome in historian, author, Hall of Famer, Mike Babcock, 40-plus years of college football excellence at MD Babs on Twitter. Babbers, put on your commissioner hat. What do you do for Ohio State?
Well, now, first of all, I'm going to say the apology from the former Ohio State Buckeye. Although I'm glad that he did it, in the social media age, pretty tough to undo that. Once you get the idea out there, it's out there. So you can apologize, but you've already lit the fire and you can't put it out, as far as I can see. And I think that's unfortunate, because I think any kind of suggestion in this time that we're dealing with this horrible virus, you don't make comments like that. I don't care what you think. You don't make comments like that, because this is a bad time and bad things are happening to people. But in the Big Ten, commissioner has created this situation.
Yeah.
There's another thing now, so you gotta backtrack and figure out a way, because you've really sort of potentially hamstrung the best team in your conference in terms of can it get to the college football playoff. Now, having said that, to my mind, you might as well just say Alabama, Clemson in a championship game and just dispense with the rest of this stuff. Even the Clemson, Notre Dame, and all that, it's not going to happen. Notre Dame's not going to beat Clemson. It's going to be Alabama and Clemson, to my way of thinking. But Ohio State wants a chance. You guys have been talking about that. You want to be able to compete if you're Nebraska or if you're Ohio State or whatever. And Ohio State's putting itself in a position where it could conceivably, play for a national championship. So how do you overcome a potential problem that was created by the conference at the beginning of the season? And I don't know what the answer is to that.
Well, it's going to be Barry Alvarez leading the way with the competition committee, revisiting the 6-game threshold, so there can at least be a conference championship game. You get a conference championship game, you win that. All right, we're Ohio State. We're 6-0.
Yeah.
But I think what you need to do is they'll need to, if they can't, they need to beat Michigan State first. Okay. Right. Secondly, they need to figure out what can happen. Is that a rematch in Lincoln if Minnesota can't go, if Minnesota's okay to go, it's Nebraska and Minnesota, the 12th. Great. So you've got Rutgers and you have Maryland that are scheduled to play. Okay. Do you make up the Maryland Ohio State game and sit right? I mean, what do you do if you're the league there? If you for some weekend you don't have a chance to have 2 cancellations, right? I mean, that's always right. What do you do to get him that extra game? Do you make an exception after apologizing to Nebraska, of course, and let him schedule something with? If you can't get a conference game in there, do you go outside the league and let a one-time exemption happen? And Nebraska just wanted to play; they weren't looking for special treatment. I mean, that's what was misunderstood nationally, Babbers, don't you think?
Right. No, I agree, and we know the Big Ten. There's going to be no apology to Nebraska, whatever the Big Ten does.
Right.
I mean, they can step in and say, well, Ohio State can play a non-conference game to fill out that spot or whatever. But it's not going to be any apology to Nebraska. They're going to look at it from a practical standpoint and just do what they do. I mean, that's the reality of the situation. And it's unfortunate that the Big Ten wouldn't concede that point to Nebraska, which we never understood that anyway, right? I mean, what's the big deal if Nebraska can schedule a non-conference game against an opponent that apparently was testing at least as well as the Big Ten, if not better? Where was the harm in that and allowing that? Why be stubborn there? But now when you're in a situation where it does matter, it has an implication for the prestige of the conference, you're going to make an exception. And, again, I don't think there's going to be any apology to Nebraska, but from the standpoint of Ohio State's standpoint, I would like to see them make that change because I don't want Ohio State to be penalized because of the situation it's in. The same kind of concern I had when Nebraska wasn't allowed to do it applies to Ohio State. And I don't think it's, on some level, I don't think it's fair to just say, well, we messed up with Nebraska, so we're going to mess up with Ohio State. I don't think that's fair.
Fix it if you can fix it.
Do the right thing. For once, do the right thing. I mean, you haven't to this point, but it's never too late to do the right thing.
Mike, I might be getting way ahead of myself here, but next week, Ohio State playing Michigan, as all the drama has been, which would be their 6th game. And Nebraska is playing Minnesota, who's also had some well-documented issues with COVID this year. If the event comes where Minnesota and Nebraska is canceled and Michigan, Ohio State is canceled, would you be against a rematch with Ohio State if that's what it takes to get them into the college football playoff?
Well, I don't think I would be against it if that's the option to give Ohio State an opportunity. And Nebraska wants to play games, and I don't think Nebraska would back down from an opportunity like that to play the game. And I, based on just what's happened so far, I'm really skeptical that the Minnesota game is going to get played. But again, it's a difficult issue, and I bet there's, everybody has a different opinion about that, and they probably hear me say, yeah, go ahead and play Ohio State and Nebraska again, and they think, what kind of a silly comment is that? But, I believe that Nebraska wants to play games, and if it can't play Minnesota, it's willing to play whomever, and Ohio State needs that game and probably is willing to certainly play Nebraska again. So, yeah, let's go ahead and do that. Now the question is then, will you play that game where?
I think you turn the lights on down at 10th and Vine, Babbers.
Yeah. Let them come to Memorial Stadium.
It's not quite Miami or Florida State in December, but
no. And what's the difference? Memorial Stadium was based after, or was part of the plan was based on Ohio State's stadium. So
yeah.
What the heck?
It's no kidding. Babber's got a few minutes left here. What's your takeaway so far? Your early returns on Husker basketball, choppy last night, but a game that Nebraska lost last year. Similar team, similar situation. They found a way to win. I know that they're kind of loaded with some talent, but Nebraska was able to kind of grind forward last evening at a later tip-off time.
Yeah, and I think that's the thing is that I'm always concerned, I guess, when you recruit a lot of transfer players and you got, all new players and you're trying to get them to mesh and so forth. It's going to take some time to do that, and that's the thing that you pointed out that you see on the floor. There's talent, there's talent out there. It just becomes a question of getting that talent to mesh in a way that is going to be competitive in a really tough, I think, Big Ten.
Yeah.
That's the thing is on the horizon. That's what you're looking at down the road is a really rugged conference and a tough conference schedule. So, but I think Nebraska has talent, and it's just a matter of getting it to mesh.
Mike Babcock's with us, Hail Varsity Magazine, hailvarsity.com, at MD Babs on Twitter. Babbers, thoughts on Saturday, Nebraska v. Purdue. Tight number, I think -2 is what Vegas says. Another one-possession game likely. Both teams have had their ups and downs with that situation.
Yeah, that's I never dispute what Vegas seems to have a pretty good idea of what these things happen, how these things happen. But I think Nebraska is going to give a good effort, and I'll be interested to see how they decide to use the quarterbacks in this game. But I think Nebraska is going to give Purdue a good go, and it's going to come down to the end, and Nebraska is going to have an opportunity again. And can you get something done at the end? Last year's game, the lead changed hands 4 times in the fourth quarter.
It did.
It's going to be Purdue has all Purdue's games. All of Purdue's games have been no more than one score difference, win or loss. So I think it's going to be a very competitive game. It's going to come down to the end.
We got about a minute and a half here. The Diaco Bowl. I mean, that's another subplot to this, and the Purdue defense is better. They're good in the red zone. I'm anxious to see what Nebraska can do once they get in the red zone. I mean, I'd like to see Nebraska turn the corner and find a way to win one of these things. And I know Nebraska fans are that way as well. But these are in a brutal season. These are lessons that maybe as young as this team is, they can take with them forward in their career. So you're on the right side of some of those one-score games. Yeah,
and I'd like to see a running back come in there, and I'd like to see Nebraska be able to pound the ball a little bit. And I don't know who that is, who that's going to be, but that's what I'd like to see is to get a running back going, and then if you can get that and start pounding the ball, then things open up for the quarterbacks, and you see a better opportunity to win the game.
About 20 seconds, Babbers. What did you think of Adrian? I thought he looked pretty good.
I did too, and I love his attitude. Mm-hmm. He's got a great attitude. I can see why his teammates elected him one of the captains. Tremendous character guy.
Mike Babcock's with us. Babbers, we'll check in again next week, and we'll see how things shake out in West Lafayette. And we'll keep our radar up here on what happens with Ohio State, the Big Ten, and this whole COVID mess. You stay safe and healthy, Babbers. Thanks for jumping on with us.
Never a dull moment. Be safe, guys.
You too. Mike Babcock with us. Find him on Twitter at MDBabs. Read him with hailvarsity.com and magazine. Brad Edwards, 20 minutes away. His thoughts on the college football playoff and the Big Ten. If a change of heart can happen, if need be, with Ohio State. And Mike Schuart, Wilderness Ridge coming up. Hail Varsity presented by the Nebraska Lottery.
And now, back to Hail Varsity Radio.
Thanks for spending time at Hail Varsity presented by the Nebraska Lottery. An update from Michigan's athletic director, Ward Manuel. He will respond to the covert agenda Michigan was accused of having. We welcome in Mike Schuart. No covert agenda for Shuey. He's just going to help you putt better, tee off better, and get that short game and mid-range game rolling out at Wilderness Ridge at Mike Schuart on Twitter. Shuey, are you bundled up? Are you still on the tee box? How are you?
No, I'm doing good, man. I just got done with a lesson with actually Mr. Aaron Babcock, trying to make him better. How
Beautiful. Good for Babbers, man.
Yeah. He's working on it.
I just hand money to him, if we're on the putting green. I just say, man, you got it going. You got it going. And Shuey, it was great to see you on the weekend. Played out of my mind. I putted well.
I heard that.
Yeah. I mean, it was.
That's always fun.
I didn't even OJ it. I just, I was pretty legit. It was good, man. So it was awesome to be out there, 60 and beautiful out of Wilderness on Saturday. So let's dive in a little bit here. I know you've been following along a little bit with college football, specifically the dilemma Ohio State could find themselves in. If you're making the schedule and things get a little shaky a week from Saturday, and Nebraska's got the opportunity to take on Rutgers or Ohio State, do you want the big dog or do you want the tight ball game against Mr. Wahoo?
Oh, man. You always want to take on the big dog because you always got to take the big dog down. That's who you want to play. If you want to be the best, you got to beat the best. And
we'll give a Ric Flair woo to that. So you're saying, thank you, Mr. Vedral. It'd be fun. It'd be tight. But let's go round 2 with the Ohio State. I get you. I'm kind of that way as well. Let's see Ohio State a second time. What'd be great, though, is if things get cleared up and Michigan gets to play Ohio State and Nebraska gets to play Minnesota. That'd be ideal.
That would be ideal.
So
that'd be actually kind of fun.
It'd be all right. I think that'd be good. So anything that pleased you against Iowa, and how do you feel about Purdue on Saturday?
Oh, our defense played better, no question about it. Man, we got to get our offense figured out. Not sure what they're going to do with that. But, I mean, they showed some signs and they showed some fight, after they played not very good against Illinois, and they came back and at least put up a good fight against them. So that was good to see. So hopefully they can build upon that and get going in the right direction. But they got to get some identity on offense and what the heck they're going to do and be able to do it.
They do. You recruited the number of years, and you got kids from around the region, but once in a while you'd venture outside the old 500-mile radius and get kids not only outside the U.S., but also kids in some golf hotspots as well. And the topic also has been attrition, and you've seen it happen with Nebraska, specifically with their Florida connection. What have you, in your years of coaching and recruiting, taken away with getting and keeping kids that are quite a ways from home? How difficult was that to have that conversation when kids decide, maybe it's time to leave, or they're thinking about leaving?
Yeah, it's always a tough one, man. You're a long ways from home. If you can keep them through that first semester or first year, usually you can keep them. But, man, that first semester is brutal. They get homesick. They're a long ways away from home. They're either not playing. They're still trying to adjust. Just a lot on them. They get pretty wound up, and they get pretty homesick, and they want to get back home. So it's like if you can fight through that first semester, sometimes the first year, then they settle in and they're usually okay. But that first year is a tough one, trying to keep them. And then you add, not doing what it is that they're used to doing. Because all these kids that are coming in, man, they're pretty high profile. They're used to winning. They're used to playing, and playing well. Now all of a sudden they're not playing. They're sitting around. They're getting worse, they feel. So it's like there's a lot of stuff that goes on in their heads. So if you can keep them, then they're usually okay. But that first semester is tough, and losing, it doesn't help. Winning takes care of a lot of things. Losing, man, that brings up lots of questions. People are always questioning. They always have the answers. I should be playing because I'm better than that guy. I don't know why they're not playing me. That's why we're losing, so on and so forth. So it's like it makes it even that much harder. If you were winning, it'd be a little easier.
Mike Schuhart with us here on Hail Varsity Radio. And Mike, I know I personally am still a believer in Scott Frost, but have the results this year combined with the roster attrition that we've seen, does it make you doubt what Scott Frost is building here at Nebraska?
There are some things that make me question, but for the most part, I mean, it goes back to winning. We were in position a lot of times for the last couple of years to actually do some things to actually win some games. I think if we would have won those games, things would be a lot different now. But we didn't. We always find a way to lose them. So, and then that starts to build on itself. It's like, how do you know how to win if you never won? So it's like they got to start figuring out how to get some wins in the win column. So they start believing in what's going on, what's happening. And coaching too, they believe in what it is, but it's like you can only believe so long before you show some results. If you're showing no results, you can believe all you want, but you're getting the opposite of what you believe. So that brings some doubt, but it's not like they haven't been in position to do it. They just got to get over the hump and start turning some of those losses into wins.
Shuey, a takeaway with Chuck and Phil and Steph and Peyton, man. What happened with Charles Swing? Wow.
I know it. What happened?
I don't know.
They gave him some shock therapy or something.
Either that or you wanted to win Phil's money.
Exactly. Uh-huh. That's probably more enticing than anything. Just give me some of his money. He's actually pretty good for the most part.
Yeah. I mean, the match, it was a little easier than expected, but were you entertained by it? Did you like the setup?
Yeah, it's always fun, especially when you get those guys that are calling in and they're doing some commentary. I mean, that's always fun. That makes it very interesting, very different, So it's I find it entertaining all the time. It's pretty fun.
Mike Schuhart's with us, Wilderness Ridge Golf. Shuey, got about 45 seconds. Where can folks find you? They want lessons. They need a tee time if we get some weather that is golf acceptable. I mean, I know you're always out there, brother.
I am, man. I looked at the forecast. It looks pretty good for December. So it looks like golfing weather. So give us a call out here. Set up a tee time. Set up a lesson. It's still, as long as it's still playable, man, we're still golfing and we're still teaching. So give us a call out here at Wilderness Ridge and we can take care of you.
Amen to that. That is good stuff. Shuey, cheer hard and have a Boilermaker on Saturday, all right?
All right, will do.
Take care, buddy. There he is.
You too.
Thanks, man. Mike Schuhart with us, Wilderness Ridge Golf. A lot of football, little golf. Shuey's got that big red hat on. Sure he does. We'll wind down hour one. Brad Edwards, his take on the Big Ten, Ohio State, the playoff setup. And Tom Dienheart will get us a look-see at Purdue. Hail Varsity presented by the Nebraska Lottery.
And now, back to Hail Varsity Radio.
One final time this hour. It's Hail Varsity presented by the Nebraska Lottery. Chris Schmidt, Elijah Herbal. Find us on Twitter at Schmidt_radio at Herbal Essence. Get the podcast and do so. The Hurrdat Media Network. You can find that tab on HailVarsity.com. Get the interviews you want, the segments you want. Also ESPNLincoln.com on demand. Elijah will have some of our conversations with Mike Babcock and Shuey. Also Tom Dienheart, Brad Edwards. Coming up on the Twitter handle as well at ESPN Lincoln on Twitter. So check all that out. Spotify, iTunes, Google Play. Write us, review us, suggest to us. Anxious and interested in your feedback. Reminder about moving. West Blue Realty is who you got to go with. If you're moving here in 2020 or 2021, they specialize in residential home sales in Lincoln and surrounding communities. And you know what? For a limited time, you mentioned Hail Varsity, West Blue Realty We'll provide you with up to $1,000 on the closing of your next home purchase. Tom Luby makes it happen at 402-540-3768. So does Kelly Hofschneider. Kelly's there to help as well at 402-202-2312. It pays to work with West Blue. Get an appointment scheduled, 1120 K Street, Suite 200 in Lincoln. So we have heard an I'm sorry and an accusation from Kirk Herbstreit. We have heard Nebraska fans out in full force get after Stuart Mandel on social media and other national writers that were there to use Nebraska as a punching bag. And Nebraska's just kind of been right all along. And it's not brain surgery. And our friend Dave Biddle, Ohio State insider, he had an amazing point. You know, the one thing that every medical expert agreed upon, and there was 1,000 different takes on this virus and playing football and when to go and yada, 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 that it was going to be a situation that had to be fluid. That was something you could accurately predict, that it was going to be unpredictable. And this just kind of gets down to the root of the Big Ten was forced to move forward with a season when they thought they were going to be right and everyone was going to follow their lead in canceling a season. They had to backtrack. They had egg on their face. So they set this rim 15 feet high instead of 10 feet high. And what's going to happen? There's a real chance Ohio State will not qualify for their own conference title game. There's a real chance, if they don't make exceptions and changes, that Ohio State's screwed and could be supplanted out of the college football playoff. They still got to win games. Ohio State's got to go unbeaten with whoever's on their schedule. They got to win the Big Ten championship. All that needs to happen. But you're in real danger if you don't make some movement here, some changes. Admit you're wrong again. That a team that has a chance to fight for a national championship will be left out. Okay, Elijah, we have Jet Splash gift cards, don't we?
Let's do it. All
right, we have 3 to give away today. We're going to give away 2 right now. Caller 8, caller 9. Caller 8, caller 9. Get yourself a Jet Splash $25 gift card, 466-3776, 466-3776, 800-825-5865. Caller 8, caller 9 right now. Get those Jet Splash gift cards.
Welcome to Hail Varsity Radio, the voice of Husker Nation. Insight, opinion, expertise, with the biggest and best names talking Nebraska across the state. Join the show on Twitter at Hail Varsity and at Schmidt_radio. Call in at 402-466-ESPN or 1-800-825-5865. Here's Chris Schmidt.
Thanks for spending time at Hail Varsity Radio, presented by the Nebraska Lottery. Into hour number 2. Tom Dienheart, get us a look at the Boilermakers. We'll say hi to Brad Edwards, college football insider with ESPN, College Game Day at @JBradEdwards on Twitter. Mr. Brad, how you doing?
I'm doing okay. Just trying to keep up with all the college football news here. It's been an eventful last 24 hours or so.
It has, and you have the Big Ten. Guess what, Brad? The Big Ten might be in a bind. Is this shocking to you?
No, and I'm expecting that whatever ends up happening will. Well, I'm not saying it won't be controversial, but I don't think that the Big Ten will end up in a bind. I mean, obviously. Everything with difficulty playing games and all that, there's no way around that part of it. But as far as, the possibility of Ohio State going undefeated, getting left out of the playoff, I don't think we have to worry about that. First of all, I don't think the Big Ten is going to allow them to not play in the conference championship game. If they miss another game, I think they will change the rules. And make sure that they're in there. And if they're in it, they're going to win it. And I really don't see who the committee could take other than them if they're undefeated. So at the end of the day, it's going to get done. It's just a question of how many other games in the Big Ten that everyone wants to play end up getting played.
That's just it. And the Big Ten will shift and refocus. Barry Alvarez is asking maybe to revisit that 6-game threshold to get to a conference title game. Nebraska fans, meanwhile, have been vocal on Twitter. This is what Nebraska was asking for in October when their game early on in the year got canceled week 2 against Wisconsin. Can we go outside the conference? No, go back to your room. Was kind of the feeling.
Yeah.
And now special rules or special changes for Ohio State. Look, Ohio State's good enough to be in the playoff. Ohio State needs a shot to be in the playoff, and it's a nice payday for the conference in a crazy year. I get the greater good here. And Elijah made the point earlier about Nebraska and Ohio State really being vocal about playing, so they've kind of had each other's back in this. But, it's just funny that the Big Ten didn't think more forward about safeguards and the ability to factor in some bye weeks. Everyone else has. Look at what the ACC's done. They're creating a pathway for a way to get either Clemson or Notre Dame into the playoff. The SEC,
both.
Yeah, or both. And the SEC's kind of throwing darts at that. If the Big Ten does not change course and Michigan's got to opt out and Ohio State's just slammed with a third cancellation, could you see A&M jumping Ohio State and getting in? No?
No, because there are a couple of reasons. And Gary Barta alluded to it last night, which is even though there's a pretty big disparity in the number of games played between the teams, if you watch them play, Ohio State's just better. Mm-hmm. We know in today's college football how much more important it is to have a really good offense than a really good defense. And Ohio State obviously has the former. A&M may have the latter, but they definitely don't have the former. And so unless A&M were just to look like a completely different team this week and go out there and go into Auburn and win by 35 points, then I really don't see how the opinion could change that Ohio State is just better than Texas A&M. And it's as simple as that. And, of course, the other factor here is that if Alabama wins out, Alabama is going to be the number 1 seed for the playoff. Do you want to put Texas A&M in at number 4 and have a rematch with Alabama? Alabama not only beat them by 28 earlier this year, but they've beaten them by about that amount almost every time they've played since Johnny Manziel left. They haven't since Johnny Football left town. There's not been a competitive game between Alabama and A&M. If you look at the scores, there'll be one that looks competitive where A&M scored on almost the last play of the game, and ended up losing by 8. But that's it. And so would you rather see that, or would you rather see Alabama play an undefeated Ohio State, whether they're the Big Ten champ or not? I think the answer is pretty simple.
Now, my point here might be a little irrelevant, but I want to bring back, because today I saw what the BCS formula would have ranked the top teams had it still been around today. And you got Alabama 1, Notre Dame 2, followed by Ohio State, Clemson, Cincinnati, Florida, and then you got Texas A&M at 7 and BYU at 8. When you compare that to the college football playoff rankings, there are some discrepancies there. So which do you think is more right? Do you think it's better to have it in the hands of these, 20 people, or is it better to have it in the computer formula, in your opinion right now?
Yeah, I think it's better to have it in the hands of the committee, because unless you're going to allow the programmers of those computer formulas that you're talking about to include every detail that could possibly be included, then they're going to be lacking some information that this season would have been very important, and much of that is related to COVID. It's one thing to just have your average year where, sometimes a team's going to lose a big game and they didn't have a starting quarterback, like Clemson losing at Notre Dame. Things like that have often happened. And of course, the computer ratings usually don't account for that, and they can, but the BCS didn't even want them considering the final scores of the game, much less details like that. So But this year you have additional details such as Clemson having other starters on the defensive side of the ball who were also out because of COVID, and it's just that this is ground that we've never tread on before. Where you've got teams that are quite often without multiple starters. In the past, it might have been one or two. Now it can be, double-digit numbers who were out. And in the case of Clemson, I think they were missing 4 or 5 starters against Notre Dame, all told. But then they come back. They aren't. It's not like it's a season-ending injury. And so things like that, I think it's important for people to talk through. Obviously, the situation that could present itself with Ohio State, with them having played significantly fewer games than everyone else. How would that affect a given computer formula? I think each one would handle it different. Are they looking at the total number of games, or are they looking at the winning percentage? So I think these are reasons that the committee is a better way of doing it. I'm not saying that I love all the decisions they make or that there aren't computer models that would say things that the committee really needs to give serious consideration to. But I think there needs to be a human element in it.
Brad Edwards with us, ESPN Insider College Football and College Game Day at @JBradEdwards on Twitter. Brad, who are your top 4? Is it the same as the committee, or would you replace somebody?
Right now, I'd have the same ones the committee does, and I might even have them in the same order. Okay. I do think Clemson is better than Notre Dame, and we'll see that when they play head-to-head and Clemson's back at full strength. But for now, because of head-to-head, and especially since Notre Dame hasn't lost a game, I think that's the order they should be in. But I do feel like Alabama is better than Notre Dame. Mm-hmm. And even with that loss, I think Clemson's better than Ohio State right now. And, we talk about the number of games that Ohio State's played, and I think there's a connection between that and the fact that we're a little disappointed with Ohio State. While they've won every game, they haven't necessarily dominated the way that people have expected them to. And I think part of that is due to missing games. Like, remember week 2 or 3? I guess it was week 3, when Alabama's defense could not get off the field against Ole Miss. All right, they looked atrocious. You're looking at this team and you're thinking, there's no way this team can win a national title with a defense that bad. This is like Oklahoma, 2 years ago level bad defense. And yet, you look at that Alabama team, and while, yes, they're not playing offenses as good as Ole Miss, the last 3 games, it's actually the last 3, it's more than 3 games, but the last 3 full games in the SEC, they've allowed 1 touchdown, and that was in garbage time against Auburn last weekend. They look like a different team defensively. I'm not saying they're going to shut down a great offense. But they've gotten better because they've been able to play more games, and guys who are inexperienced have gotten reps. Ohio State hasn't gotten the chance to do that. And so I think this is something that's going to be a real issue for them if they do make the playoff. It's not a lack of talent. It's just a lack of opportunity to get out there on the field in game situations and be able to improve from getting more experience. I think that's what's hurting them right now, and I think that's the reason that I believe that Clemson is better than they are.
Brad, I want to go to Nebraska for a minute. And Nebraska got chopped up quite a bit, not by all in the national media, but by some of the national media for wanting to play and continuing to push back against the Big Ten when it came to fixing the Wisconsin cancelization. And now you're going to have to maybe change some rules for Ohio State or figure things out, or maybe have a Nebraska-Ohio State Part 2. And what's your response to that? You've always been really fair with Nebraska. They wanted to play to get better, and they didn't get that opportunity with the Wisconsin game, so they got to watch week 2 like a number of teams have had to deal with. But do you think there'll be a little bit of we kind of get you now a little bit, Nebraska, from a national standpoint, or will it even be revisited?
No, I think most people are kind of focusing on Nebraska's record, okay? Mm-hmm. And they're saying, "Oh, you wanted to play all these games so bad. Look how well it's gone for you. See, you should have chosen not to play." But I don't think anyone at Nebraska would have said that was the best thing. Sure, you're 1-4, but are you going to be better in 2021 for having played these games? I think there's a chance that you could be. Mm-hmm. Maybe you're going to figure out your quarterback situation going into next spring, or certainly got a better chance to have figured it out, coming out of the spring based on the reps that everybody's getting this year. And look, if you're searching for a silver lining, I mean, they have played 2 top 25 teams down to the wire. And so it's easy with Nebraska's standards being what they are because of history to say, well, this is a complete mess and they're so far away from being where they need to be, because most Nebraska fans think that they need to be contending for the playoff. But if you're simply asking the question, how far away are they from being a potential top 25 team? I don't think they're that far. And I know some days, like the Illinois game, it feels like they are. I think it's a matter of just getting more consistent, by being able to go out there and do what you're supposed to do, I guess, is the way to do. Like last week against North Carolina, Notre Dame won its 30th consecutive game as the betting favorite. That doesn't mean they covered the spread. They haven't covered the spread in all of them. But the last 30 times they've been declared the favorite in a game, they've won it. And what that does, that type of consistency, when you're not losing to teams that you shouldn't lose to, you're raising the floor for what your program is. And that's Nebraska's problem. I think we know where their ceiling is at the moment. Their ceiling is kind of at a top 25 level. The problem is that their floor on a given week can be much lower than it should be. And like I said, you raise that floor by getting more consistent, and the only way that you're going to get consistent is to play more games. And so as tough as the season's been, I think it was worth it.
That's a lot of folks have echoed those thoughts that would love to be in the stadium on Saturdays, Brad. And I think that's where Scott Frost is coming from. You're not going to get better unless you play. And this year's been a lump-taking year. Brad, about a minute and a half, your reaction to accusations out there that the teams have kind of given COVID a hug to avoid embarrassment on Saturdays. There's some thoughts out there by folks on ESPN. There's also some snarkiness from a couple of coaches in the ACC towards other programs.
Yeah, I don't think anyone is out there intentionally getting COVID in order to get out of playing a game that they're probably going to lose, and in some cases get embarrassed on the scoreboard. But I do think that there probably are situations, and I'm not going to point a finger at any one of them because they're all different. I don't know which one is guilty, but I know there have been enough of them that I think the odds are good that at least someone, somewhere along the way, has looked at their numbers and said, oh, you know what, we could play. But based on the letter of the law, we're allowed to call it off because we don't have enough players at this position, and I would rather not play than go out and get humiliated. Mm-hmm. And would I do the same thing in that position? I can't tell you for sure that I wouldn't. I hope I wouldn't. But it depends on where my program is and how much damage it could do to lose a game by 40 points to a conference rival. So it's hard to say. It's hard to say. I tell you this. I give the Pirate a lot of credit for going out there the last 2 weeks with 40-something scholarship players and playing Georgia and Ole Miss, because he had the numbers where he would have been allowed to call it off, and he played both games, and they were both competitive and good games all the way to the end.
They were right there, and Pirate does his thing with the rebuild, and it's not for everybody, but those who stay end up usually doing pretty well. Brad Edwards with us. ESPN Insider College Football Analyst. Brad, fun chat today. Thanks for your insight as always, man. Always appreciate you jumping on.
You got it. You guys take care. I'll talk to you next week.
All right. There he is, Brad Edwards, ESPN Insider College Football. Really good stuff. Loved his take on Nebraska, and that was really nice to hear from a national voice. We'll get some thoughts on a guy who knows the Big Ten pretty well, and Purdue. Tom Dienhart's next. It's Hail Varsity. We're presented by the Nebraska Lottery.
And now, back to Hail Varsity Radio.
Back with you, Hail Varsity Radio, presented by the Nebraska Lottery. Let's talk Purdue and some Big Ten. Welcome in Tom Dienheart with us, and can find Tom on Twitter at TomDienhart1. Covers Purdue for goldandblack.com. Tom, we'll get into Nebraska, Purdue, the Diaco Bowl, all the excitement for Saturday in just a second. What's your read, real quick, though, with Ohio State in the Big Ten? There's danger every weekend, right, of a team missing a game due to COVID and a cancellation. I read some of Barry Alvarez's comments earlier about maybe revisiting that 6-game threshold. What do you see shaking out, or do you think the Big Ten stands pat with how things are?
Boy, I tell you what, I guess I'm in the camp where I hope they can go in and revise those rules. I hate the fact the Big Ten has boxed itself in like this. You know, if there's one thing we've learned, I think, throughout this pandemic is you've got to be adaptable. Mm-hmm. And, again, I think the Big Ten's got to be adaptable in the situation. You don't want to box out the best team in your league from getting an opportunity to play for the league championship. So I guess I'm hoping that cooler heads prevail and maybe the Big Ten can revise those rule requirements.
That'd be great. And if things don't work out, I mean, Nebraska is supposed to have Minnesota here to end the regular season. I don't know if a part 2 would be appetizing for Nebraska fans, but would you rematch in Ohio State, Nebraska if that's the route you had to go? Would the league allow that, or would the league allow BYU to maybe sneak in and check in with Ohio State, or an Ohio State Cincinnati showdown?
I don't think you'd see the league go outside and for an opponent. And I guess, you know, when they first came up with that last cross-division matchup, I don't know if that's what you're alluding to, but I think they want to try to avoid rematches if they can. But again, who knows, Chris? Again, I think there's got to be a lot of flexibility here. And, you know, we've already seen 2 games canceled this weekend within the Big Ten. Mm-hmm. And, again, you just have to be adaptable and be willing to make some compromises and changes because, you know, what really the victory this year in a lot of ways is just getting these games played. And right now we really seem like we're limping toward that finish line, doesn't it? We are. Tom Dienhart's with us, and he's joining us, Hail Varsity Radio. You find him goldandblack.com, covers Purdue. And been around the Big Ten a long time, Tom. So what's your impression of Nebraska's 2020 with how things have gone from afar? I know you've seen this program up close, too. But what's your reaction to the way things have shaken out for Nebraska and Coach Frost? Well, a tough year. It seems like the offense is still really looking for some type of an identity. A lot of quarterback runs. It sounds like they're going to continue to play 2 quarterbacks on Saturday when they get here to West Lafayette. McCaffrey and Martinez are proven adept at moving the ball with their feet. Passing the football, I guess that's another question. You know, the receiving core there hasn't been stellar. Not much production with running backs as well. I know they like their line. And defensively, I think they're playing well. They seem to be pretty evenly talented in all 3 levels of that defense. And, you know, you mentioned off the top, Chris, the Diaco Bowl, right? Nebraska fans, I'm sure, don't have fond memories of 2017, Bob's only year there in Lincoln with Mike Riley. And I tell you what, here in West Lafayette, you know, things started off well in the opener against Iowa, a 24-20 win. The defense looked good, but with each successive week, Purdue's allowed a larger number of points. In the last 2 games in particular, the defense has not looked very good. Purdue's been in every game. I mean, their record could be flipped around. I know they're in the midst of a 3-game skid, but the way you started out, you kind of held on against the Illini. You did really well. I mean, Bell went off, and that's with no Rondale in the lineup, and he was a difference against Iowa, but you're right there against Northwestern. And, you know, where's the team's morale? And back to Diaco as well. You know, with this team, how's the connection been with Diaco and this defense he inherited? I know from just my time watching Purdue, you guys have always had a couple of dudes on the defensive line that can get after the quarterback. You've been good against the run, and you've had some athletes defensively. I know you were Purdue was trying to upgrade, but it's tough a lot of times in that first year with a new coordinator. Yeah, it is. And, you know, back to your point about the close games, you're exactly right. Purdue's been in every game this year that they've lost, 2-3, you mentioned the 3-game losing streak. All 5 Purdue games have been decided by a total of 28 points. So you can see the small, window of margin for error for Purdue here in these close ball games. And last week they gave up a kickoff return for a touchdown against Rutgers, which really proved to be the difference. The week before Minnesota on a Friday night, you get a 27-yard field goal block, and they missed a 33-yard field goal. They lose a 3-point ball game. Of course, that game was noteworthy for the offensive pass interference call on Purdue late, which took away what could have been a game-winning touchdown. So, again, when you're playing these close games, you got to be buttoned up. You can't beat yourself, and they've had some problems on special teams. And defensively, they can't get off the field on third down. It killed them last week. Chris, if you can believe this, Rutgers had the ball for over 13 minutes of the fourth quarter last week.
That's incredible.
I know that. They can't get off the field. They have 1 turnover generated the last 3 games. They've got 1 sack in the last 3 games. So while that defense has done some good things, again, they're still struggling for takeaways. They're struggling to get sacks, and again, they're struggling to get off the field on third down.
Tom Dienheart with us here on Hail Varsity Radio. And Tom, the Huskers themselves are no stranger to losing close games too. But from a Purdue perspective, where do you think Purdue can beat the Huskers on Saturday? If they do get the job done, in what position group do you think the win falls on?
Well, I mean, I think it's more side of the ball. And for Purdue, it's always going to be the offense. They're never going to have a 3-and-out defense that's a lights-out 1985 Chicago Bears or 2000 Baltimore Raven defense. They can just never get that type of personnel, so they're going to always bleed some points and yards on that side of the ball. So you're going to have to win with your offense typically at Purdue. And while the defense went through their bloody resume, so to speak, of late, and you still have to throw some of the blame at the offense's feet too. It's like I talked about in the second half. When you get the ball, you have to be able to move it, keep it away from the opposition with your ground game, which has been a little spotty for Purdue this year. So, again, Purdue's wide receivers, Moore, Bell, they have an emerging tight end in Payne Durham. They have a good quarterback in Jack Plummer. That's going to be the side of the ball. And the receivers in particular, I think, gives Purdue an advantage. And if they're going to win this ball game, if they're going to beat Nebraska for a 3rd time in a row, it's going to have to be because of their wide receivers and the quarterback playing their offense in general.
Tom Dienhart's with us, Hail Varsity Radio, goldandblack.com. Tom, what you laid out, Nebraska's better defensively, all right, but these two teams sound like twins. Am I wrong?
Well, I think you're right. I know Nebraska's secondary is very talented, and they've got some veterans on that side of the ball, and it's going to be a fun matchup watching their secondary going against Purdue's receivers. And, yeah, I mean, there's a lot of heartache, a lot of similarity, I guess, a lot of strength that are the same, too. And it's been a fun series. Like I said, the last 4 games, honestly. When Nebraska won a game here in 2017 on, the last drive of the game, Purdue won in Lincoln in 2018. They had to hang on, and Purdue won again here last year. I think they had to rally late to beat the Huskers. So it's been a fun, competitive series that's gone down to the wire pretty much each of these last 3 years.
Tom, last year's Purdue game still, I mean, there's a lot of one-possession, 3 to 7 point losses during the Frost tenure, but, man, you look back at last year's game in West Lafayette, Nebraska jumps out 10-0. They end up settling for a field goal, could have gone up 17-0, some play calling that's still criticized to this day, inside the 10. And then you have the incredible play call by Braum with the quarterback keep, right? That sucks the outside linebacker in to go ahead. That game a year ago is still circled by Nebraska fans. You beat Purdue on the road. You go get Maryland, and then you're looking potentially at a 7th win. But you're at least bowl eligible, right, with the Iowa game a year ago. So this game has always been extremely tight. And, Purdue has won their fair share. I know it's not happened this year, but Braum's pretty good, isn't he? I mean, he's just got that knack as far as making the right call at the right time if he has the opportunity with possession.
Well, he's done okay. I'll be honest with you. I've got something I'm going to run tomorrow. I went back and chronicled, he's been here since 2017. I went back and chronicled his 1-loss record in games decided by 7 points or less. And It's 7-15.
Oh.
So he hasn't exactly distinguished himself.
He's been good against Nebraska.
Yeah, I mean, again, I guess you're going to win some, you're going to lose some, right?
Yeah.
But by and large, he is. The one-loss record does not reflect kindly on him when it comes to games decided by a touchdown or less. And like I said, you got to keep things buttoned up. You can't beat yourself. That's something a team like Northwestern typically doesn't do. They play a good, sound brand of football, and wait for you to make the big mistake and then crunch time and then steal that ball game from you. So, again, Purdue's still kind of very much a work in progress, even though we're in year 4 of the Brom era. I'll be honest with you, fans are getting a little antsy here. Brom's in no peril, of course.
Sure.
But, again, you'd like to see a little bit more progress because he got the Bulls his first 2 years, but 4-8 last year. This year, 2-3, trending the wrong direction. They really would like to finish this year stronger. They have Nebraska, then they go to Indiana. Not going to be a treat. Mm-hmm. And, of course, their crossover game is going to be against somebody like Michigan.
Well, and, I got about 2 minutes here, a little less than, but you've been around the Big Ten, Tom Dienheart with us. Your reaction to just where Michigan's at, and is this a one-hit wonder for Indiana, or is this got some momentum with Coach Allen there? I know he had a good year last year, 8-4, but this year they were special, and we'll see what they can salvage without Penix.
Yeah, it's hard. That's the thing. They're going to go Tuttle, the Utah transfer, big drop-off from Penix, obviously. Sure. And I think Tom Allen's got a solid program in Bloomington, but we saw P.J. Fleck have a year like this last season. They sort of came back to earth. Things go in cycles. I do think the foundation is there, but they're not going to be as awful as they typically have been from time to time. So credit to Tom Allen. Jim Harbaugh, it seems like if you listen and to enough of the national people and read enough stories, it sounds like he may have a chance probably to come back if he wants to come back in Michigan. It's probably going to be his call, maybe with some staff changes, especially Don Brown to D.C. So, yeah, I know he's a little bit of an oddball, but he still has a pretty good overall record. And I guess the big X factor is just this whole year with COVID, the strange circumstances. Do we give a pass to a lot of these guys? I don't know, but I think that's probably going to be the case. A lot of these coaches are going to get a pass given the craziness and the circumstances trying to play football amid this pandemic.
Tom Dienheart with us, Sail Varsity Radio, goldenblack.com. Tom, you take care, stay safe and healthy. Thanks for a few minutes.
You got it. Thank you for having me.
He's in his 30s, but sounds like he was born with a stogie in one hand and a brew in the other.
Now, say my name.
It's Schmitty on Hail Varsity Radio.
I got the body of a taut preteen Swedish boy.
Back with you, Hail Varsity Radio, presented by the Nebraska Lottery. Time for a Jock Talk Wednesday, Lincoln Orthopedic Center. Dr. Ben Woodhead with us. Dr. Ben, did you get all the turkey crushed?
We try to eat as much as possible, Chris. That's for sure.
Well,
how about yourself?
We went the prime rib and the short rib route on the smoker, and it was fantastic.
Nice. We dabbled in a little prime rib as well, so we kind of do it a little atypical for traditions.
Well, you know what? Dabbling in prime rib is never a bad thing, man. That's
you could do that on any holiday.
I know. Well, a tough one on Black Friday. Colin Miller, the week before, was knocked out, and just a scary scene at Memorial Stadium against Illinois. And Miller on his feet and helping out his guys on the sideline against Iowa. And wanted to dive into the spinal concussion topic and injury. And it's such a physical, violent game that no matter all the precautions you take as an athlete and as a football player, that wrong hit can really cause a lot of fright. And this is something that Nebraska and players in the college level and the NFL all have to think about in the back of their mind, probably.
Yeah, absolutely. Over the last, decade, I say we've taken such dramatic measures to try and avoid these types of head injuries and neck injuries, but it just goes to show you that the violence in the sport, no matter how many precautions you have, accidents can still happen. It's just with that perfect perfect storm of a type of hit that can send these athletes in these type of injuries.
So when a athlete gets a spinal concussion, is there one certain particular way, or is there varied ways that this type of injury can happen?
Well, I mean, you look at a lot of these guys, these massive hits that you see on a weekly basis, and nobody ever has these spinal concussions. And so, for whatever reason, the body and the spinal cord is in a specific type of injury pattern, and it gets jolted, and that's how you get damage to the spinal cord. And so, contrary to the regular concussion you hear, where you get the brain injury, this is actually related to the spinal cord. And like in Colin's scenario, you get this kind of transient paralysis where you can't feel anything, or you aren't able to move your fingers or toes or anything like that, and you kind of wait for the extremities to wake up. As he was being carted off, it looked like he was moving his hands, but everything below that, it was a little suspect.
Well, and when you have this spinal concussion, it's temporary sensory impairment and motor weakness, and you kind of laid it out earlier, that perfect storm the wrong way. You take a hit the exact wrong way, and that's what can cause this.
Absolutely. And fortunately for him, the worst case scenario when people have these injuries, you always worry about permanent paralysis, and you're kind of in that waiting game until you wait for those sensory symptoms to wake up. It can last myriad of time. Kind of studies have shown in the past it lasts 24 to 72 hours, but when that's your body and you're waiting those 72 hours to wake up, it's devastating for a while.
It'd be absolutely frightening. When it comes to that waiting game, the medical procedure and the monitoring that goes on, what are some of the steps that the medical side takes, not only with the waiting game, but also, after, you get feeling back, what are some of the steps that happen to monitor and keep an update on where things are at? Obviously the communication, but just from a technology standpoint, there's lots of new instruments, I would think, that can help determine and diagnose.
Absolutely. Well, and as some of it comes back and he's able to feel, no amount of study's really going to compensate for the fact that his sensation's coming back, no matter what the study says. But, I'm sure once they transferred him, going back to the basics, they stabilized his head to make sure they don't do any further damage if he did have an actual spinal cord injury. Took him to the hospital. I'm sure he actually got an MRI to make sure that there was nothing broke, in the cervical spine or anything like that. And then, you just monitor for stimulation of whether he can feel types of variety of pinpricks or dull sensation or sharp sensation, what have you. And I don't think in the short term really there's any type of study that you're gonna do to check those motor or sensory impulses, but you just wait for the gradual return of it. As long as there's nothing catastrophic on the MRI or on the other imaging studies, it truly is a waiting game.
Dr. Ben Woodhead's with us, Lincoln Orthopedic Center at Jock Doc Wednesday. We're talking spinal cord concussion. And as far as this injury, the lasting effects, is there a weakness in strength in some of the extremities? Is there a likelihood of, if you've had it once, you're going to get it again? Let's talk about the long term of just normal functionality as a person, being able to, walk to class or, just do what you've been doing your whole life.
Right. Well, there's not a lot of information out there, and it's still, kind of variable on what the consensus is for how to treat these. But similar to regular concussions, when you have brain injury, you're waiting for that swelling or the edema in the spinal cord to basically kind of dissipate or, just improve over time with the healing. And so theoretically, if, even though you saw him on the sidelines walking around, last weekend, but if he were to go back and get another hit and jolt that spinal cord, the second injury around theoretically can be much worse, with potentially more damage and then a slower recovery time. And then, beyond that, the second and third types of injuries, you don't know how much of that's going to recover. Still weren't even sure if everything was going to recover after the first time. So you don't rush these athletes back into play. And it's still controversial on what the exact timing and kind of stepwise approach there is to basically letting these athletes come back. I think with the short amount of games left that we have, I think the wisest decision for him was to keep him out.
Dr. Ben Woodhead's with us, Lincoln Orthopedic Center at Jock Doc Wednesday, and we're talking the spinal cord concussion. And is there anything that comes to mind in the research as far as when this kind of came on the radar of injuries?
Well, I think, it's probably happened for years, and a lot of times we probably never knew what it was. But I think over the last 10 to 15 years that we've learned a little bit more. But still, I think spinal concussion is still, behind the studies that we have on brain concussions. And, we have all these return to play type activities for concussions regarding the brain. But this is a lot less common injury. So, I just don't think we're seeing a lot of it. And so I think the knowledge that we have on return to play is not quite as concrete.
This has been misdiagnosed as a stinger, but the way the medical advancements have happened, this is more so on the grid, so to speak. So there's it feels like there's a lot less misdiagnoses with this.
Absolutely, yeah. Those stingers that, guys used to get back 20, 30, 40 years ago, it makes you wonder if some of these types of injuries are actually occurring.
Dr. Ben, thanks for a few minutes on the spinal cord concussion. Have a good rest of your week, and we'll do this again.
You as well, Chris. Thanks.
Miss us?
Come here, brother. Give me a hug. Bring it in for the real thing.
We're on call for you. Catch the podcast at HailVarsity.com, the ESPN Lincoln app, or download them on iTunes.
Saddle up, partner.
Back to Hail Varsity Radio.
One final time, busy today. Big thanks to Mike Babcock, Mike Schuhart, Brad Edwards, fantastic on Nebraska, the Big Ten, and the Ohio State playoff situation. Tom Dienheart got a slowdown on Purdue. It's the Diaco Bowl, of course, but I always think of Seabass when it comes to the Boilermakers. 3 Boilermakers, please, from Dumb and Dumber. That man over there, Seabass?
Took me a second, okay.
Yeah.
See, I was thinking, I thought you were talking like Sebastian Janikowski.
No, I mean, that's
like,
the other Seabass, right?
I was like, did he?
So we need to do another steak and a beer bet. I'll take the points in Baltimore.
The game's already happened, hasn't it?
Yes, it's over.
I'm just making sure here.
No, it's over. It's over. It was a joke. Pittsburgh 19, Baltimore 14. I was going to give you Pittsburgh, but I needed the points. Trace McSorley sighting.
Yeah, a 70-yard touchdown pass.
To Hollywood.
Yeah.
Pretty nice.
I wasn't expecting that game to be so close, but
I have seen more pictures, and our old buddy Kevin Suits tweeting out the picture of Diaco heading into North Stadium in the Argyle sweater, the jeans, the shades, and he gave everybody a peace sign in the media that day, and it's like, yep, $825 for 1 year, $875 for the second year. Bang. And good info from Tom Dienheart on Purdue. Tomorrow, Gary Barnett will be with us, Brandon Vogel, the Pride of Chicago, Danny Burke. We may have a Grant Wistrom sighting. Working on old number 98. I want to remind you about buckling up. 70% of people in fatal crashes in Nebraska not wearing a seatbelt. If used properly, seatbelts can reduce risk of fatal injury by up to 60%. Your best defense in any crash, buckling up, brought to you by the Nebraska Department of Highway Safety Office. This is like cruel, but I've seen enough pictures of Diaco. Right, and Diaco's one of many people blown out here over the last 15, 17 years at Nebraska, but it'd be kind of dark humorish to have like a fired section.
In the cutouts, yeah?
In the cutouts. and put it behind either the West or the East Stadium. And put him behind, a few pillars.
little coach's graveyard of sorts.
Well, not just a lottery ticket type deal, right? Because I mean, you paid out millions upon millions to people, so that's the that's you were asked to leave. We're paying you to go away section. So let's get caller number 5 right now. Caller 5. That last Jet Splash gift card for $25 right now. We'll give away another one tomorrow. We'll give one away on Friday. But caller 5 right now gets a $25 gift card to Jet Splash.
This is a good test today to see who's listening to the end of the show.
No, I know. I said 3. You and I, maybe. We're not eligible. 466-3776. 466-3776. 1-800-825-5865. Caller 5 right now gets a $25 gift card to Jet Splash Car Wash. Good to see Elijah Herbal. Chris Schmidt back at you tomorrow at 4 with Hail Varsity.